Hello, my name is Webb Mealy. I have a PhD in Biblical Studies with a specialty in eschatology and the Book of Revelation. In this little informal recording, I'm going to be giving you a commentary on what's known as the Isaiah Apocalypse. This is Isaiah 24, verse 1 through 27:5. It's a very unusual part of Isaiah because it's completely focused on eschatology, not on things such as the exile and return or the Assyrian army or the Babylonians or anything. Nothing in it ties specifically to any historical events that Isaiah prophesied about during his lifetime, but it's very eschatologically focused, and that's why I'm going to commentate on it. I'm also going to be noting its relationship with the eschatology of the book of Revelation. Let's begin with Isaiah 24, verse 1. Behold, the Lord will empty the earth and make it desolate. He will twist its surface and scatter its inhabitants. This is starting to sound like a huge earthquake-like thing where the surface of the earth is getting all scrambled up. And it shall be, says verse 2, as with the people, so with the priest, as with the slave, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, and so is the seller, as with the lender, so is with the borrower, as with the creditor, so with the debtor. All classes of human beings who come under God's judgment are going to have the same experience. No one is going to be able to get out of it because they are rich and can flee a war or float above the effects of a famine because they're so rich they can afford to deal with that. Now, this is very interesting because I'm going to switch a tab here and have a look at Revelation 6. This is the sixth seal is opened, and John sees every mountain and island was moved from its place. Then the kings of the earth, and the great ones, and the generals, and the rich and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him who sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath is come, and who can stand? So this is the end of the age as prophesied in the book of Revelation, and the physical surface of the earth is completely rumpled up and changed, just as it says in Isaiah 24. And just as in Isaiah 24, verse 2, it also says that every class of sinner is going to be included in this. No one will be able to escape. So let's go back and look at our text in Isaiah again. The earth will be utterly empty and utterly plundered, for the Lord has spoken this word. The earth mourns and withers. The world languishes and withers. The highest people of the earth languish. The earth lies defiled under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed the laws, violated the statutes, and broken the everlasting covenant. Now, it would be a normal thing to ask whether this word, the earth, refers to the land of Israel and or Judah, or whether it's referring to the entire inhabited earth, including all nations. We will find out later in the chapter that it's definitely talking about the whole world and not simply the land of Israel. Now, about this everlasting covenant. There are two places in the scriptures of the Old Testament in which the expression everlasting covenant, which in Hebrew is Berit Olam, are mentioned. One of them is at Sinai, where the covenant that God makes with the Hebrews, along with the Ten Commandments, right, is called an everlasting covenant. But there is another one that happens before that concerns all nations, and that one is after the flood. where God says to Noah and his family in chapter 9 of Genesis, I'm making with you an everlasting covenant. And the covenant is the covenant that is signified by the rainbow, and it is God's promise never to bring a flood on the earth again. But covenants have two parts. One, obligations or promises on the part of one party, and then there are obligations and or promises demanded from the other party. Implicitly, the question is, what is humanity's part? Well, to understand that, you have to understand what had happened that resulted in the flood in the first place. Here's what the author of Genesis says. Oops. Let's go back to Genesis 6 here. About the condition in which the earth was when in the time of Noah. It says, the Lord saw that the wickedness of humanity was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of their heart was only evil continually. So what does this mean, evil? Were they thinking, too many thoughts about sex? No, it says, verse 11, now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. This word corrupt, we think of it as meaning political corruption, like people being dishonest and stuff and taking bribes. That is not what this word means. It means the earth was rotten. It was ruined. Why? Because it was filled with violence because of human beings. God saw that the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, and for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Everything was being ruined. And then God says to Noah, actually this is a bad translation. Let me go on to the tools to look at this more literally. Right? God said to Noah, this is word for word, literally, the end of all flesh has come before me. The translators decided that this means God has decided to kill everyone. But my understanding is that the text says the earth was full of violence because of human beings, and God is looking down from heaven as creator and manager of all the creation and is saying, I'm seeing the end of all flesh taking place right in front of my eyes. And I'm going to have to intervene. Why? Because if God does not intervene, humanity will bring itself and the living world to a violent end. This is the reason why God brought the flood on the ancient world, according to the author of Genesis. Because if he had not intervened, humanity would have destroyed itself and the living world along with it. And this is exactly, if you think about it, what Jesus says will happen in the time before the end of this age. Jesus warns, if God had not shortened those days, no flesh would be saved. And what does it mean to say God would shorten those days? That is, God will intervene through the glorious second coming of Jesus Christ to bring an end to sinful human history. And not only that, but Jesus himself compares the days that are before his coming in glory to the time of Noah. What was the characteristic of that time? Violence everywhere. The earth full of violence, so that if God did not intervene, humanity would have completely removed itself from the earth. In other words, corporate suicide. So that is the everlasting covenant that God made with Noah and his offspring, that they would no longer fill the world with violence, and so God would not intervene and kill everyone with a flood. But it says in 2 Peter that there is fire coming next time. There will never be a flood, but when God comes to judge the world through Jesus Christ, that fire will be the means of cleansing the world from human sinfulness in the last day. So this covenant of protection of the earth, of nurture of the earth, that's actually does not only go back to, if you think about it, not only goes back to Genesis chapter 9, but it goes all the way to Genesis 1 and 2, where human beings were given charge of the living world when they were created. And symbolically, in chapter 2, it says that they were put in a garden to take care of it. They did not take care of the world that God had given them. They actually brought it to a violent end, and God had to intervene. The same thing is predicted by Jesus and by Peter. And let us see whether it appears that Isaiah is prophesying the same thing. Therefore a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants suffer for their guilt. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are scorched, and few men are left. Now that's very interesting, because that corresponds to Revelation 16. This is the seventh. Well, no, let's go above that. What do you call it? The bowls of wrath, or the vials of wrath, right? The fourth angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. People were scorched by fierce heat, and they cursed the name of God, who had the power over these plagues. They did not repent and give him glory. The fifth angel poured out his bowl on the throne of the beast, and its kingdom was plunged into darkness, and people gnawed their tongues in anguish. They cursed God of heaven for their pain and their sores. They did not repent of their deeds. It's tempting to think that their sores are sunburn from the destruction of the ozone layer, and people being scorched by the sun. Anyway, the seventh bowl, it says this: there was a great earthquake, such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And God remembered Babylon the Great to make her drain the cup of the wine of the fury of his wrath. And every island fled away, and no mountains were to be found. We're going to see indications of this in Isaiah 24 in a moment. But the scrambling of the surface of the earth is a theme in the book of Revelation that's right at the end, right at the moment when Jesus Christ is about to come in glory. But here is how it continues in Isaiah 24, after talking about people being scorched by overheating. The wine mourns, the vine languishes, and all the merry-hearted sigh. The mirth of the tambourines is stilled, the noise of the jubilant is ceased, the mirth of the lyre is stilled. All the entertainments people are used to are all gone now. No more do they drink wine with singing. Strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The wasted city is broken down. Every house is shut up, so that none can enter. There is an outcry in the streets for lack of wine. All joy has grown dark. The gladness of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city. The gates are battered into ruins. I'm thinking this is a prophecy about Babylon the Great, the wasted city, the one that the profligate, luxurious city that's so full of luxury that comes at the expense of the poor. For thus shall it be in the midst of the earth among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, as at the gleaning when the grape harvest is done. The imagery here is that of a tiny remnant of folks who are faithful to God and who will be saved through this terrible judgment on all the nations. The the grape harvest, no one intends to leave any grapes behind, but sometimes there's a few hiding behind some leaves and you don't notice them. And so in the whole vineyard, there will be a handful of grapes still there that for somebody. And the olive tree, they do not intend to leave any olives on the tree. And they beat it out with sticks like they beat the slender branches with a stick, and it makes the olives fall off when they're ripe. And that's the idea of a small remnant of humanity is going to be left. The rest of humanity is going to perish. And then there's a huge transition. After talking about this horrendous judgment of nearly all of humanity perishing and the earth being scorched, the surface of the earth being twisted and deformed, it says this: they lift up their voices, they sing for joy over the majesty of the Lord, they shout from the west. Therefore in the east give glory to the Lord, in the coastlands of the sea give glory to the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. So Gentiles and or Jews who are in exile all over the globe are now rejoicing. Why? Because God is coming to judge the world and to rule in glory, and they are happy. This is God's welcoming committee, whereas most of humanity is just rebellious and perishing and mad that their luxuries and their pleasures are all gone away. These folks are like praising God, clapping their hands that God has come. From the ends of the earth we hear songs of praise, of glory to the righteous one. Now another transition. And note that it's not a big deal that this happens in the middle of a verse, because when this scroll was written, there were no chapters and no verse markers. There were no such things until the 1600s or something. So Isaiah's, this is the whoever put the versification here didn't understand the transition, but it's very obvious. From God's welcoming committee cheering God on as God comes to reign in righteousness and glory, we get this. But I say, in other words, Isaiah is appalled. He says, I waste away, woe is me. For the traitors have betrayed, with betrayal the traitors have betrayed. Terror and pit and snare are upon you, O inhabitant of the earth. He who flees at the sound of terror shall fall into the pit, and he who climbs out of the pit shall be caught in the snare. So there's an enormous betrayal going on. And what is that about? Let's have a look again at Revelation 16. It says, Babylon the Great was remembered in this time of the great earthquake. That God remembered Babylon the Great. What happens to Babylon the Great? Revelation 17 predicts that her leader, whom in the book of Revelation he's pictured as the beast, her leader decides he's had enough of her, and he defects to opponent nations and gathers together with them and presumably brings to them sensitive defense security information so that they can perpetrate a sneak attack on Babylon the Great, which is the most powerful country or civilization in the world. But they all attack her at once, and she goes up in flames in one day. I think that betrayal on the part of the beast and Babylon's enemies is what Isaiah is prophesying here. For the windows of the heaven are open, that's the last part of this verse, and the fountains of the earth tremble. The windows of heaven, what happens when the windows of heaven are opened? Right? It says, on that day all the fountains of the deep burst forth, and the windows of heaven were opened, and a great deluge of rain came down on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, right? So in the symbolic cosmology of the Hebrews, rain comes down through sort of holes in the solid expanse above, and so does hail. And we saw here in chapter 16 that, this last verse of chapter 16, great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people, and they cursed God for the plague of hail, because the plague was so severe. So water can come down from heaven, out of the windows of heaven, either as water, rain, or as snow, or as hail. Any one of the three. And it says, the foundations of the earth tremble. The earth is utterly broken. The earth is split apart. The earth is violently shaken. The earth staggers like a drunken man. It sways like a hut. Its transgression lies heavy upon it, and it falls and will not rise again. So this is the demise of the current cosmos, the current earth as we know it. It is so shaken by earthquakes that no mortal human being could survive. We have a picture in 1 Thessalonians of the faithful being lifted up off of the surface of the earth to meet Jesus as he comes in glory, and that everybody else, all the sinful and the unrepentant, will perish. That's what you get in chapter 5 of 1 Thessalonians, immediately following the being caught up to meet the Lord in the air as he comes to reign on the earth. And Jesus has a similar image. He says he's going to send his angels to the four winds of heaven, to the far corners of the world, to gather all the faithful. That is what is pictured with the welcoming committee, right in the middle of all this horrible, horrible stuff, right? We have, they lift up their voices and giving glory to God from all the furthest ends of the earth that Israel knows. That's all the faithful being gathered to greet Jesus and his Father as they come to reign in glory. And then it says, on that day, what day? On the day in which the earth falls, not to rise again, this old earth. On that day, the Lord will punish the host of heaven in heaven and the kings of the earth on the earth. Now, host means army. We found in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, that the devil gathered rebel angels around himself. A third of the angels in heaven joined in rebellion with the devil and fought with all the rest of God's angels, and they were booted out of heaven. They lost the battle. So the host of heaven, this isn't just all the host of heaven that's being talked about here. It's talking about the rebel host of heaven will be dealt with and punished. By the way, this word punish here, which occurs twice in the verse, that's the Hebrew word pakad. We'll look at that. Right? There it is. Pakad. And then down at the bottom, further down. Oops. Well, there and there. I don't know why it says that. That's not correct. Pakad. It occurs twice. This word normally, in its literal meaning, if we just look at this here, means to visit. But it means it can mean a whole bunch of things. See, visit in there? That's the most literal, normal, everyday meaning to it. But it is used for a lot of different, it has a lot of applications. It's sort of like a euphemism for judgment, among other things. But let's go back here. Basically, I mean, in so many words, it says, on that day, the Lord will see to the host of heaven in heaven, and he will see to the kings of the earth on the earth. Yeah, it's actually, I see my English translation does not repeat the word, but it does repeat in the Hebrew beneath there. And what he's saying is he's going to deal with them, right? It's like, wait till your dad gets home. He's going to deal with you. I mean, that's how flexible that word is. It can be very ominous, but it's somewhat of an understatement. And how is God going to deal with the rebel angels and the rebel kings of the earth? They will be gathered together as prisoners in a pit. They will be shut up in a prison, and after many days they will be punished. In other words, they will all be thrown in the underworld together. And after a long period of time of co-imprisonment in the underworld, they will be released and dealt with in a final word. So this last one right here is also pakad. So they will be dealt with presumably in a final way after they're drawn out of prison after a long imprisonment. Now this makes a huge parallel with the book of Revelation. If I can find this, there we go. Here is Revelation 19, verses 19 to 21, plus the first 3 verses of Revelation 20. Don't forget, there are no chapter divisions in the book of Revelation as written by John. I saw the beast and the kings of the earth. Remember the kings of the earth from Isaiah 24? The kings of the earth on the earth? With their armies and gathered together to make war against him who is sitting on the horse, that is Jesus Christ, and his army, i.e. his angels and all the faithful. I believe that Christ brings with him, he brings us with him when he comes to the earth to reign in glory. And the beast was captured, and these guys are thrown immediately into this thing called the lake of fire. But the interesting thing is that the rest besides the beast were slain by the sword that came from the mouth of him who was sitting on the horse, and all the birds were gorged with their flesh. In other words, all the kings of the earth and all rebel human beings whatsoever are slain by Christ when he comes in glory. And what happens to people who are slain according to the book of Revelation? Let's have a look at Revelation 1:18. Oops. Colon. This is not happening. 1:18. I am the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forever, and I have the keys of death and Hades. In the book of Revelation, Hades is a prison for the rebellious human beings. Faithful human beings go to heaven in the book of Revelation. The rebellious go to the prison of Hades, and they will get out of there only if and when Jesus Christ unlocks them with his and releases them through resurrection. His having the keys of death and Hades means he has the power and the authority to release people from the condition of death or the underworld, right? I'm trying to find this thing there. Nope, not that one. There it is. So when Jesus Christ slays all the rebels on earth, all the unrepentant people on earth, including the kings of the earth, when he comes in glory, that sends them to the prison of the underworld. And then it says, then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain, and he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the pit, and shut it and sealed it over him, so that he might not deceive the nations any longer, until the 1,000 years were ended. After that he must be released for a little while. So we have the kings of the earth and the leader of the rebel host of heaven in the book of Revelation, all thrown into the underworld at the same time when Jesus comes in glory. Right? We saw in Revelation 12 that the devil, I already said this, right? That the devil recruited a bunch of angels and made, into an army, and they got booted out of heaven. Now they're getting booted out of the earth. Implicitly, the devil's angels are tossed in the underworld with him, but this is all focused on the devil himself. But so what we have here is a completely parallel passage to Isaiah 24, verses 21 to 22. They are gathered together as prisoners in a pit and shut in prison, and after many days they will be seen to or punished, right? However, what happened? It says that the devil, whoops, if I can just get this to, there we go. It says here specifically that the devil will be imprisoned for a long, long time, i.e. 1,000 years, right? But we don't find out in that moment what happens to the kings of the earth and all the unrepentant human beings who are tossed into Hades, which is the same thing cosmologically as the pit. Well, in verse 5, after verse 4 says that all the faithful came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years, it then says this: the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. In other words, they remained in the prison of Hades, the underworld, until the 1,000 years were ended. Notice this: until the 1,000 years were ended. That is not only in English, but also in Greek, the very same expression. Oops, I'm not. Until the 1,000 years were ended, in Greek is the exact same 5-word phrase as you heard. If you were listening to the book of Revelation being read aloud, you heard the exact same phrase 2 verses ago. About 20 seconds ago, you heard the very same phrase. So you know that when the devil is released from the underworld after the 1,000 years, the rest of the dead, i.e. the rebellious, unrepentant dead, will themselves be released from the underworld by resurrection. So that's completely parallels this thing, where both the angelic rebels and the human rebels end up in the underworld together, knocking around together for many days, and after many days they will be punished. They will be brought out together. They were thrown in together. They will be brought out together and judged together. Then the moon will be confounded and the sun ashamed. For the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. That's the result. God sweeps all rebellious beings off the earth or out of the active creation and throws them all together into the penalty box of creation, the underworld. And for many days they are unable to do anything. And God reigns on Mount Zion in glory. That's the end of the chapter. Let's call it a wrap there for this chapter.